Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Real and the Rare. My name is Scott Morgan, off the Motor City Mad Mouth Long, and my co-host is Xavier McKnight. Good evening, Xavier. How are you?
Good evening, Scott. Doing well. As always, it's a pleasure to be on here to do The Real and the Rare with you, to be on the WSAN network. And we hope that everybody is ready for the spicy and hot entrees that are coming out of our kitchen tonight.
Yeah, I look forward to doing this broadcast a couple times a month with you. Plus, I also enjoy having you on other shows as well. The one thing I know about you that I can always expect is an outstanding performance based on research and your knowledge of what you do and the way you present yourself, for sure. I know tonight's theme is an NBA theme, but I'm not going to start quite there. I want to, first of all, personally and professionally congratulate the Miami Marlins for defeating the Chicago Cubs, going up to Wrigley Field, winning 2 straight. This team, I've had the good fortune of covering them this year. I didn't start in spring training. I didn't finally reach the PR guy until, the middle of the year, but just in time for summer camp. And the way the Marlins have treated me and the Tribune have been nothing short of phenomenal. And I feel like this whole team, to me, I feel like a part of a team again, with learning a lot of the beat writers and all that, and the way they made me feel welcome and a part of it so far has been really good. But this is a team of destiny. This team has gone through like 61 players, 174 transactions. Everybody calls them bottom feeders. And to me, they have, in my opinion, if Don Mattingly does not win the manager of the year, there's something really, really wrong. Because this team doesn't get the national exposure that it should. Naturally, it's coming off a 105 loss campaign. They made their first trip to the playoffs since 2003. And ironically, I was at one of the playoff games where Pudge Rodriguez, you remember that play at the home plate? I was sitting up in the press box when that was in there, and I took a champagne bath in the locker room. It was a tremendous feeling being a part of that game against the Giants. So congratulations to my Miami Marlins, and I wish them well taking on the Atlanta Braves, ironically, in Arlington, which is where the bubble will be for the National League. And, of course, in the American League, the bubble shifts to L.A. and San Diego. So the bubble in for the American League, for those of you folks that are interested, you'll have, obviously, the National League parks. You have them out in Houston, or Texas is the home for I believe, the National League, right?
Yes, it is.
You have Houston and you have Dallas. So they'll be in Texas. And then for the help me out again. Okay, so for the National League, they go to Texas. The American League, they go to Southern California, consisting of San Diego and Dodger Stadium, right?
That is correct. But here's one thing I will say about that, and I can understand where there is some confusion on your part or anybody else's part about this.
Yeah.
Houston and Arlington are home to teams that play in the American League. San Diego and Los Angeles are home to teams that play in the National League. So it would make the most sense if the teams in the National League were heading to California and the teams in the American League were heading to Texas. That would make the most sense to me, because at least it would still be related to the league. But it is what it is. We're happy to have playoff baseball here. We're happy that we haven't heard of any more COVID-19 outbreaks happening in the league. Just very thankful for this time of year that we have. We have so many sports going on right now that, I mean, honestly, let's just go ahead and enjoy this, because when it's over, we don't know when exactly it's going to come back, because these leagues, there was already questions outside of COVID-19 on them restarting due to financial circumstances and things like that. Right. So we don't know how that's going to play out going into the 2020, 2021, or if not just the 2021 season itself. So let's just be thankful for that. And also, I'd like to congratulate the Miami Marlins as well. I'm not surprised that they defeated the Chicago Cubs at all. These Miami Marlins, when I go back and I watch old film and documentary, Scott, of the 97 and 03 Marlins, and the fact how they never really had any true superstars on either of those teams either. Now, they had players on those teams who would later go on to become superstars, like Miguel Cabrera in 03, Gary Sheffield in 97, but they weren't exactly considered superstars when they were a part of the Marlins organization. That wouldn't happen until much later on. What I'm saying is that this current Marlins team, you look at how they're made up, they have some of the same pedigree that those former two teams had too. And not to mention, they're managed very well, which those two Marlins teams were as well, by Jack McKeon and what is the other gentleman's name? I can't remember.
Jim Leland was on the other one.
Okay.
Yep.
I couldn't remember his last name.
Let me respectfully disagree with you on one thing, okay? I'm actually glad the way the bubble's set up. I like the fact that the National League teams are going to play in the American League parks and vice versa, because they didn't want a distinct home field advantage one way or the other, which is why they set this thing up. So it's okay for us to disagree once in a while, and I do disagree with you. I'm glad that the National League teams are in Texas and the American League teams are on the West Coast. Now, getting back to your point, okay, yeah, Jim Leland was obviously in the 97 team, and of course Jack McKeon on the 2003 team. They both ended up being fire sales anyways. At least the 97 squad was, and then of course they trade away a lot of the young talent. Of course the Detroit Tigers are the beneficiary of the Miguel Cabrera trade. Of course then they had to throw in Dontrell Willis to pay him his money. But, it was like a salary dump there. But this one is was much well-built. I love Derek Jeter and Michael Hill at the top, and Mark Sherman, I believe, is the owner. So this Marlins team here, they made some bold moves. JT Real Muto, I think, went to Philadelphia in exchange for Sixto Sanchez, and these are the kinds of sound baseball moves that they've made. They got some interesting veterans on this team, too. Corey Dickerson's been disrespected all over the place. Jesus Aguilar. This team has a lot of Oakland Raiders. We have a bunch of cast-offs. We go with a lot of young pitchers and a lot of young players. They brought in Miguel Rojas over from the Dodgers when Don Mattingly was there. He's like a spare infield. And Miggy is the captain of this team. So this is just such an unbelievable bunch. The way they are a family. They bonded together. They're using everything on the planet from bottom feeders to motivate them, and it's us against the world mentality. They were the laughing stocks during COVID-19 when the breakout happened with them first. Cardinals ended up getting it, but meanwhile, this team here is going to advance. And you want to talk about team of destiny? There wouldn't be enough, to me, there would not be enough one-liners or, things that you can do to describe this team. They're just unbelievable. And if the national media hasn't had an opportunity to get to know them since they're never on national television, mark my word, a lot of people are getting to know this team, and they're getting to know it really quickly. And right now, I've been saying all along, they're on house money. This is a team that has a chip on their shoulder. They don't care what anybody thinks. They believed in each other from the beginning. And for me, having covered Tigers earlier in the year and then moving over to the Marlins, it's been interesting because I've had to learn on the fly, rely on the beat writers a little bit with their questions, as well as some of the TV personnel, and try to relate to mainly baseball questions until I got up to speed. But I'm learning as we go, and I don't think you could work with a better manager than Don Mattingly, who's one of the most humble, down-to-earth, blue-collar guys on the planet. Doesn't hurt he's from the Midwest, from Evansville, Indiana. I'm from Detroit, although we've never talked about that. That'll be it for a conversation I see with Donnie, perhaps in spring training. But it's been unbelievable the way it's working. So it's nice to have a horse in the race. And for those, they're going to have their hands full against Atlanta, but nobody expected them to get here to begin with. A 105-loss team. They were 31-29, had one doubleheader stacked on top of another. And to see that they're competing and fighting hard, who the heck in their right mind wouldn't be able to root for them?
Yeah, they're definitely a great story. Not only just the COVID stuff, but the fact that they lost 105 games last season, and now for them to be where they are, there were people calling for Derek Jeter to be ousted as the owner of this team, and now, Derek Jeter and the way his mentality is set up, he's not laughing about it now because, of course, the ultimate goal is to win that World Series championship, and then he'll be doing some laughing, but not as of right now.
Well, don't lose sight of one thing, okay? Derek Jeter comes to the Yankees, and he knew that he had to build within. Just because a guy didn't manage, wasn't in a general manager role up there, doesn't mean he wasn't a captain of a team that getting it right. And he's trying to go out there and build the same foundation here that he will. And he will. I mean, you can't base what the Marlins are doing on a 60-game season because obviously everybody's snapped their playoff drought along the line. But What you can base it around are the players they have in their system. They had a pretty sound draft this year. So this is a team that's built for sustained success. Now, I have one other baseball note I want to run by you before we go to basketball, okay? And that's this. There's talks that Al Avila, the general manager of the Detroit Tigers, has Alex Cora and A.J. Hinch on his list of potential managerial candidates to replace Ron Gardenhire. What are your thoughts about that?
I'm not in favor of either of those moves happening just simply because of what both of those men did at the teams that they were a part of. Alex Cora when he was manager of the Boston Red Sox, but also when he was a part of the Houston Astros staff in 2017, and of course A.J. Hinch as manager of the Houston Astros in 2017. We know what they did. We know what they were a part of. We know what they were the lead of, and we know what they had to ultimately take the blame for. And rightfully so, they had to take the blame for that. And for them to be up for jobs this soon, I knew that they weren't going to be blackballed out of the league forever. Because when you have some form of success the way that they've had it, there's going to be a team out there that's going to take a chance on you, no matter what the public outcry and response to that is going to be. But for it to happen this soon, no, I'm not in favor of it at all, and I'm actually kind of surprised by it. But when I look at the Detroit Tigers organization right now, they want to take a chance of getting back to prominence as quickly as possible. It seems like just yesterday the Detroit Tigers were in the World Series in 2012 against the San Francisco Giants, and then a year later in the ALCS against the Boston Red Sox, and Miguel Cabrera was the best player in baseball. And it feels like it was just yesterday, but it wasn't. Those days are far long gone now. And they're trying to do what they have to do to get their team back to prominence. That part I understand, but I'm not in favor of either one of those moves possibly happening.
And you know what? I really disagree with you on this one, and I'll tell you why. I believe everybody does deserve a second chance. I really do. You have two great baseball minds out there. They've had a year. They haven't been paid at all year, so they already got hit in the checkbook. So I didn't think that they would get blackballed. And the Detroit Tigers went from Brad Ausmus, who didn't want the rebuild, to Ron Gardenhire. Now they want to go with a younger, more experienced guy. Now Al Cora obviously has a world championship ring. And A.J. Hinch has done a good job. So this is where we totally disagree. If they can bring in a younger guy who buys in the analytics and is up to speed on some of the today's players, I'm totally in favor of it. If indeed they decide to go that route. Again, they've had 3 or 4 tough years, but then they ended up getting to the playoffs 4 years in a row. So, I think they're also have a good, like the Marlins. Okay, they're rebuilding, so they have a lot of good prospects and players in the system. Now you just need the right type of manager to get these guys to blend well. So I'm totally in favor about those two guys being looked at. And we don't know what other candidates are out there. Those are the two of the names that Al Avila has already talked about. Now, I don't think that Hinch's suspension ends until I believe into January of 2021. But regardless, managers don't do anything. As long as they're ready to go by spring training, it doesn't make any difference anyhow, because the general manager is making all the decisions. So I just thought I'd run that by you here so we can talk baseball until we go to that other thing called basketball. That thing that they go ahead and shoot, put it in the hole. In the NDL, though, the National Drama League, because I have a feeling that we have a feeling of the NDL type of broadcast tonight, folks. Just so you know, my version, Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Man Mouth version of the NBA, is the NDL, the National Drama League, and and we have a lot of interesting characters. With that said, I'll segue over to you and give us your main dish on this particular night.
Well, first we'll open up with Doc Rivers now being the head coach of the Philadelphia 76ers. This is an absolutely deserved move for Doc Rivers. I want to go ahead and comment back on something that I said a few weeks ago when we were last doing this broadcast.
Sure.
When I said Doc Rivers needed to be fired from the LA Clippers, I simply meant he needed to be fired from the LA Clippers. Not that he didn't need to be a head coach in the league. He's a championship winning head coach. You still continue to give those guys opportunities. Now, he had been at the Clippers now for 7 years. They had not won a championship. They had not advanced to the Western Conference Finals. And he had championship caliber teams on 2 different occasions. And on 2 different occasions with both of those teams, he blew 3-1 leads in the playoffs in the second round. You can't do that. And with the direction that the Clippers are looking to go in, you knew that Steve Ballmer had to make a move some way, somehow. Someone had to pay for that epic collapse that happened against the Denver Nuggets this year. whether it was going to be Doc Rivers, whether it was going to be Paul George, no matter what it was going to be. And it's still some more moves that could be happening within that organization, and we'll speak on that in just a bit. But this is a nice move for the Philadelphia 76ers. Had Doc Rivers been fired just a day later, he probably wouldn't even have had an opportunity at this job because they were really leaning towards offering the job to Mike D'Antoni.
Right.
And they want to have a more offensive-based team. I understand that. But when you have a chance to acquire a coach who knows what it's like to win an NBA championship, as opposed to hiring a coach who just has a good offensive system but has never even coached in an NBA Finals as a head coach, you know which decision you should make right there. And this is one move that I'll say, Scott. I've been saying ever since the Philadelphia 76ers were ousted out of the NBA playoff bubble, how are you going to make it work with Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons? This Doc Rivers is one guy I believe will figure out a way to make it work with both of those guys. I believe that Joel Embiid will now be forced to play more like a big man as he should be. Ben Simmons will be shooting the basketball more. And let's not also forget about the fact that Tobias Harris had the best season of his career when he was playing under Doc Rivers with the Clippers before he was traded away to the Philadelphia 76ers. So he will figure out a way to unlock some things out of Tobias Harris that Brett Brown could not do. So I'm excited for the Philadelphia 76ers. I'm excited for their fans, and I hope those players are ready to work.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's face the reality. You're right. Doc Rivers wasn't going to be out of work that long anyhow. But this is their best opportunity with all the tanking that you had going on there to get these premium draft choices. You're not ready to blow up that core right away. And these two guys are certainly young enough to get it straight. And obviously, Tobias Harris, to me, is familiar. But you know what? The 76ers, to me, need a whole lot more than that. They really do. So, you know, you bear in mind now, I'm not going to hold Rivers solely responsible that they traded away, Blake Griffin, and they also let Paul get away. I mean, that's not his fault. They're trying to regroup on the fly and do something else. I think they could have gotten to the finals, but I've always maintained that the Los Angeles Clippers are the worst franchise in sports. I really believe that. I always will believe it. There's other ones that rank up there with them, but to me, the Clippers are right near the top. So and of course he didn't want to go ahead and play second fiddle to the LA Lakers anymore. The 76ers are the only game in town up in Philly, so it doesn't make any difference. So.
Well, not only that, Scott, when I go back and I look at some of the coaching jobs that Doc Rivers did in these playoffs, I really begin to question that he even still want to be a part of the Clippers organization. Because, right. I mean, let's just go back and let's go back in history here a little. Throughout the time that he's been with the Clippers. When he first arrived there, he not only had head coaching duties, he also had some power in the front office as well. Mm-hmm. Well, eventually that got stripped away and it was given to Lawrence Frank.
Right.
And last year, the Clippers brought the great Jerry West into their organization as an organization advisor. So we knew where that was going to go. And we didn't know if Jerry West even wanted to keep Doc Rivers as a head coach. And the fact that they did not extend him going into this year to give him a multi-year contract as opposed to his deal expiring after next season had he still been there, you knew that, okay, it's either NBA championship or bust at this point on whether we're going to keep Doc Rivers. His name had been floated around as potentially being on the hot seat for a few years prior to that playoff run, and it wasn't really much of a run, but it was the fact that they gave the Golden State Warriors a run in the first round last season with that team of misfits that he had last year, who just played hard and played with a lot of heart, meaning Lou Williams, Patrick Beverley, Montrezl Harrell, and some of the other players they had, Danilo Gallinari, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, two players who are now with Oklahoma City Thunder, and we'll see how much longer they're going to be there because we expect that team to completely blow that situation up. Yeah. But prior to that season happening, his name had been floated around to being on the hot seat anyway. So this wasn't exactly a matter of if it was going to happen. It was a matter of when. And once again, someone had to pay the price for what happened against the Denver Nuggets. And it wasn't going to be Kawhi Leonard.
Right, well, without a doubt. Now, one of the big mistakes that Philadelphia made was when they didn't even when Jimmy Butler bolted. I thought he was on the hearts of that team, and look what he's done with Miami. We'll talk about that in a little while. But Jimmy Butler, to me, gets a bad rap everywhere he's gone. He's one of the hardest workers out there, and you know what? I love Jimmy Butler's game, his attitude, and he found a place where he's appreciated. So, without a doubt. And Jerry West, let's face it, Steve Ballmer has some pretty good people around him. Anytime you have Jerry West right within the friendly confines of your organization, you're certainly going to pay attention to him. And so my question to you is this, and I don't know why I haven't seen his name bring up. Why the heck does Mark Jackson does not have a coaching job? To me, is beyond my wildest imagination.
From what I have heard, reports indicate that teams and front offices and ownerships are not happy with some of the stances that he has when it comes to his religious faith and where he stands on certain things that are going on in our country that I'm not exactly going to speak about just simply because I don't want to go into that territory.
Okay.
But he has a stance where he is on that they don't necessarily agree with. That's the only thing that can even come close to that. And those are just based off of reports that I have read. That's it. I don't know that stuff to be factually true. We see reports that are written up all the time that end up being a lot of hogwash anyway. But I'm not saying this is or it's not. But it doesn't make sense to me why he's not a coach in the league anyway. Yeah. He rebuilt the Golden State Warriors organization. He turned Steph Curry into an all-star. He put Klay Thompson on the verge of becoming an all-star. The only thing that Mark Jackson didn't necessarily do well in his time in Golden State, he didn't do the best job of developing Draymond Green necessarily. Draymond Green developed a little more when Steve Kerr got there. And maybe that's because Steve Kerr said, I'm putting David Lee on the bench and I'm inserting Draymond into the starting lineup. That's the only thing that maybe he didn't get right when he was with the Warriors organization. But other than that, he turned that absolute doormat. Think about this, Scott. 2 years before Mark Jackson showed up, the Warriors were one of the worst teams in the league. And just 2 years later, they were in the playoffs, and they defeated the number 3 seeded Denver Nuggets in the first round while the Warriors were the 6th seed. And they gave the San Antonio Spurs a run in that second round. So we knew that they were building something special there. Did we know that they were going to become what they ultimately became? No. Nobody's going to make a prediction on that. But once again, all of that is led up to because of what Mark Jackson did to help develop those players and develop that team. He definitely deserves a shot to be a head coach again. And honestly, I'm just holding out hope in some form or fashion that maybe the New Orleans Pelicans will give him a call, because I feel like that would be a situation that's very similar to what he inherited when he went to Golden State. And that's a lot of talent there, and he could turn that franchise possibly into a winner too. I just want to see him have an opportunity to actually see it through with the fruits of his labor, wherever it is that he possibly ends up next, if he does end up somewhere next.
Yeah, I remember what he did with the Golden State Warriors. The team was horrible when he got there, and in a couple of years they were competitive. So if the biggest mistake he made was at that time he wasn't developing Draymond Green, so be it. Rick Carlisle didn't quite develop Tayshaun Prince, but Tayshaun came around performing in the playoffs, and we know how that turned out, and ultimately led him to a championship. Sometimes coaches have certain players that are playing well, or they have that they want to put in more. I mean, that stuff happens. No guarantee that you're going to develop a guy that it will always work out. You know, it's just a judgment call at that particular point. But to me, I don't know about the extracurricular stuff that surrounds Jackson. He's still very visible when it comes to broadcasting. He's a good basketball mind out there, and I don't see why he's not gainfully employed. Sitting on a bench is beyond my wildest of imagination. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I'm getting senile in my old age, okay? But I always thought that the object of the game in any sport is you're kind of like you're supposed to win. Now, am I really losing this here? Hello?
No, you're not. You're not losing it at all, because I look at the Mark Jackson situation the way I look at the Marvin Lewis situation. Mm-hmm. It was time for Marvin Lewis to go with the Cincinnati Bengals. You couldn't get over the hump. You couldn't win a playoff game. But he had that organization steady for such a long time to where you thought it would only make sense for some other organization to say, you know what, let's give him a chance to come in and be our head coach and see if he can do the same things here. That is exactly how I view that situation right there. It doesn't make sense to me why Marvin Lewis is not a head coach in the NFL right now, just like it doesn't make sense to me why Mark Jackson is not a head coach in the NBA.
Yeah, but you know what? Let me interrupt you on this one a little bit, okay? I don't like your comparison with Lewis. He was gainfully employed a long time. His record in the playoffs was horrible. He was like winless in 8 or 9 tries. So I you know what, I might struggle with that. I think maybe the reason Lewis, I don't know how old he is, so I'm not going to get into the age thing, but to me, he stayed with the Bengals for a long time and did well. So, and now the reason why that Lewis is employed is, number one, you got a lot of, they're starting to go with much younger coaching minds than they did, like the Sean McDermott's, the Sean McVays, and a lot of other guys. Whereas in Mark Jackson's case, you got guys in their 60s coaching and so forth. So we differ on that one too. But again, that's okay. I have no problem with it. I don't expect yes mans on this broadcast. We both have strong opinions. I don't want a yes man. But to me, Jackson should be a head coach in the league. Just like at one point or another, I thought that Patrick Ewing should be. But of course, he's with Georgetown. But we never know what the actual decision-making is when it comes to hiring a head coach. Now, I know one guy that never became a head coach because he had a bad reputation with Bill Laimbeer. He couldn't get along with anybody in the media. And, when you're a head coach in the NBA, you have to be the face of that franchise, and you got to promote that franchise in such a way. And I think a lot of teams shied away from his personality, not only towards us, but being the front man. But getting back to Jackson a little bit, to me, he should be employed, and there's so many openings. If not now, when? I mean, Billy Donovan, I think, is going to do a good job out with the Bulls. I really think that was a good hire for them. I'm not sure what direction the Pacers will go in. We'll find out. But I think that would be an ideal spot for Mark Jackson. After all, he had success with Reggie Miller over there.
And not only that, Scott, and we're going to speak on some more of these coaching openings in just a second, but I want to go back to one thing you said about the Philadelphia 76ers before we jump head first into that.
Okay.
Yes, the Philadelphia 76ers do need to get some more pieces on that team. In particular, they need to get some guys who can knock down the three ball and who will also bring it in and hit some shots in the mid-range. They have a lot of guys on that team right now who I don't know if it's because of how Brett Brown's system was set up or what it was, but they don't do a very good job of hitting shots outside of 15 feet from the field. And this is a league now where you have to be able to hit the shot at least 25 feet from beyond. Now, could Doc Rivers unlock something with some of those players? Yes. But when I go back to that Philadelphia 76ers roster they had 2 years ago, when they had J.J. Redick out on the perimeter, when they had Marco Bellinelli, a shooter, out on the perimeter, Ersan Ilyasova was on that team, a big man that can shoot out on the perimeter. They have to surround Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid and that team in general with more shooters like that. However, with that being said, it's going to be a fresher breath there to see Joel Embiid, a big man, down low in the post more than seeing him at the top of the key. That's one thing I knew that Doc Rivers is going to insert in that system right away.
But my question to you about Embiid, though, is I think he's made out of glass. I really do. Needs rest every 5 seconds. Can he handle being in the low post way the game was played for many years and flourished under the presence of a low post center? Can he handle it for the course of 75, 80 some odd games? Right now, his durability doesn't lead me to believe that's the case. And they better have a couple of centers just back up Embiid if, he's not able to at least compete all year. It's a tough being in the low post. To me, it's physically demanding, and this guy hasn't shown me enough to convince me that he can do it. Although you never know. I mean, it depends on how the system. But they better have a lot of depth under center for the system to work out. I mean, I like the idea of going to a low post guy. I was brought up. That was my way of watching basketball play when it was played the right way. Okay, not patty cake baker's man versus smash mouth basketball.
Well, here's one thing I'll say about this when it comes down to Joel Embiid's durability. The one thing that I believe has hindered his durability is some of those excess pounds that he has on his body, and that's something that Doc Rivers is going to work with him with. They're going to get him on a proper nutrition system because, Scott, I'm not sure if you know this, but Joel Embiid is known to have a consistent diet of Chick-fil-A. And we all love a good Chick-fil-A every once in a while.
Right.
But you can't eat that stuff every single day. You can't eat that stuff before every single game. You can't eat that stuff before every single road trip. You have to mix it in and put in the proper foods in your body that you have to put in there. So one of the first things he's going to have to do is he's going to have to change up his nutrition, and he's going to have to get in the gym, and he's going to have to get rid of some of that excess weight. Once he's able to do those things, I believe he will be able to be more durable. That's just me. But I believe that that's also playing a role into why he can't stay healthy.
So let's trade Chick-fil-A for Culver's. What do you think? For me and you and Candy, that's a great move, isn't it?
That would be fine for us, but we're not going out there to play in an 82 to 100 game NBA season.
Oh, come on. We got to slip a little bit of cheese curds and some custard in there with the marshmallow cream. My goodness, but I'm with you. Hey, there's nothing wrong with Chick-fil-A, but I guess for 82 games, I get it. I have a little humor here to this whole thing, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the 76ers do. I mean, I think Rivers is a fine hire. They're bringing him in mainly to protect themselves from making a mistake by unloading these guys. So my question is, do you think Brett Brown will ever land anywhere?
I believe it's going to take him at least another year to land somewhere, and I don't believe he's going to become a head coach again right off the bat. He's probably going to have to go be an assistant on a really good staff somewhere for him to be given a chance. Now, for what it is that he inherited and what he had to endure,
right,
and it was right for them to keep him throughout that time. Because it's not his fault that Sam Hinkie was absolutely tanking the way that he was. That was absolutely egregious. But we understand why he was doing that too. It just was an ugly sight to see. So I'm happy that Brett Brown got to see some of those years of labor come into fruition just a bit. But honestly, Scott, I thought Brett Brown should have been out after last season. Just simply because the reports were coming out that he and Jimmy Butler were not getting along. And when you have a chance to retain a player like Jimmy Butler's caliber, you do what you have to do to make that happen. Unfortunately, it may have to come at the expense of a man losing his job, but you're in this business to win championships. And one of the biggest mistakes, if not the biggest mistake that Elton Brand has made as the general manager of this team, he did not keep Jimmy Butler. If Jimmy Butler is still on the Philadelphia 76ers, we are talking about the Philadelphia 76ers versus the Los Angeles Lakers in the NBA Finals right now, potentially.
You know, I could buy that one, believe it or not. Well, look at Jimmy Butler's in there with the Heat. So, and I think his fiery, intense leadership to me, if anybody understands things right, yeah, he's a most underrated player in the NBA. I think he is.
No, I agree with you on that. I've been a Jimmy Butler fan since he was in Chicago. I'm very disappointed how the Bulls organization handled him too, quite honestly, but I understand it to a degree because they just wanted to completely rebuild. After Derrick Rose didn't come back from that torn ACL the way that they thought he was, and he continued to have other injuries, the train just pretty much fell off the tracks at that point. But I enjoyed Jimmy Butler when he was in Chicago, playing on those hard-playing Tom Thibodeau Chicago Bulls-led teams with him and Joakim Noah and Carlos Boozer, and how they were alternated the point guard situation with Nate Robinson and Aaron Brooks and some of the other players that they have in. Those were some fun, hard teams to watch because they came out and they played the game the right way. As far as the tenure that he had in Minnesota, I could care less. The Minnesota Timberwolves organization has absolutely no right to sit here and tell a player how they should and should not play and operate in a franchise. You have been out of the playoffs for 14 consecutive years prior to Jimmy Butler coming to your organization. I don't care what Glenn Taylor or anybody in that organization has to say. As far as I'm concerned, they're the only team in the Western Conference right now that even when everything is upright and everyone's fully healthy, they're the only bad team I see in the Western Conference right now. Everybody else could potentially vie for a playoff spot. The Timberwolves, I don't see it. Now, they do have a team that could potentially be up for ownership. Maybe by the time the season kicks off next year, Glenn Taylor won't even be the owner of the franchise. Maybe that changes things. I don't know. But not to even turn that into a Minnesota Timberwolves conversation, just simply because I don't care about that organization. As a matter of fact, I feel sorry for guys like Karl Anthony Towns that they are there in that abysmal organization because he's such a great player. I just don't care how they handled that. But Philadelphia and Chicago, I'm very disappointed in how they handled that whole thing with Jimmy Butler. But I get why Chicago did it. They wanted to completely start over and rebuild. Philadelphia, absolutely no excuse for that.
Well, let me give you a little Minnesota Timberwolves piece that I'm not overly thrilled about before you were born, okay? They drafted Rick Mahorn in the expansion draft. I think the Pistons are trying to get him to take somebody else, but they were determined to take Mahorn. He wouldn't play there, and he let them know he wouldn't. I don't think he ever played there, but
he did. He spent that next season playing on the Philadelphia 76ers.
Right, yeah. So he forced his hand out of Minnesota and forced to trade. But the fact that they took him and the Pistons were trying to make him move so they wouldn't. But that organization has been dysfunctional for sure. But we're not turning this into a Minnesota Timberwolves broadcast, but I can appreciate your point. I think another word that describes Jimmy Butler is probably the most misunderstood guy in basketball as well. So let's get on to some of the other business at hand. We talked about Doc Rivers, but now I think some of the things you were telling me about Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, I don't even know why I'm talking about these bozos on this show, only because you suggested that we do it, and I'm going along with it anyways. Go on. Tell me.
I stood with Kyrie Irving earlier this year on his stance when it came down to Black Lives Matter, but I definitely can't stand with him on this here. That was absolutely ridiculous what he and Kevin Durant did on that podcast yesterday. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that they just wanted some attention. They wanted some of the headlines. Let's think about this here for a second, Scott. We have the NBA Finals going on. Right. We have the NFL happening. We have college football happening. We have the baseball playoffs happening. And we just finished up with the Stanley Cup Finals. Also, congratulations to the Tampa Bay Lightning and the job that they did.
Yeah.
They just wanted some attention. No one was going to be paying attention to that podcast had this gone the way it should have gone with an actual functional conversation. So, of course, they had to say something that was off the rails, which Kyrie Irving is very much known for. I won't get into the specifics of some of the things that he said in the past that they just rub people the wrong way, or they just make your head want to spin around your body. Do a completely 360. But no, two things he said yesterday. First, I'll speak on the coaching thing that he said, saying that I don't necessarily see where we need a head coach. I don't necessarily see us having a head coach. Some days I could be the head coach. Some days KD could be the coach.
Right. That was bad. I actually, once you brought that up, I started to read that myself. You intrigued me. And, the first things that came to my mind were, number one, okay, Steve Nash is a good basketball mind, for one thing. Number two, if you want a player coach, let's go back to Bill Russell. Okay, and he was winning championships doing it. I remember another example of that was when Pete Rose was a manager and a player. So what you have right now with Kyrie and Kevin Durant is they think they're in a country club, and they figure that Steve Nash is a puppet. So that, to me, is about the most unbelievable, idiotic thing I can say. But when, one thing you have to learn in life, like we all do, is consider the source. And if those two guys are a good source, and help me, God, because they're anything but.
And on paper, Scott, on paper alone, with all of the talent that the Brooklyn Nets have, on paper, they should be the favorites to come out of the Eastern Conference next year, as long as everybody's able to be healthy. Right. But when you have situations like this going on, you don't even know if they're going to make it out of the second round, just simply because one bozo doesn't know how to keep his mouth shut when he should be doing that. Okay, here's one thing I want to say about the context of what he said about some days he and KD could be the coach. I only get it from the standpoint that we understand that there are coaches on the floor and some of these players with the knowledge that they bring to the game and some of the experience they have. LeBron James is a coach on the floor right now for the Los Angeles Lakers. He's an extension of Frank Vogel and Jason Kidd and Phil Handy and that Lakers coaching staff. He's an extension of it. Rajon Rondo is an extension of this as well, with the experience that he has. When you start talking about some of the low post in the defense, you can say Dwight Howard could possibly be considered a coach on the floor with what he's accomplished in his career as a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year and at one point being considered the best center in basketball, which he was. And I don't know if that's what Kyrie Irving meant when he said that. Personally, I don't even care to try to understand it that way right now. That was just a really stupid thing to say for a first-time head coach who is coming into a situation trying to figure out how to make things work, and he's walking into this situation in particular. And once again, this goes back to where everyone said, well, maybe Kyrie wasn't necessarily the problem in Boston. No, Kyrie was the problem in Boston. Brad Stevens is a really good head coach, and they had really good players around him. They had really good infrastructure. The Boston Celtics, even though I am a Los Angeles Lakers fanatic, here's one thing I would say about the Boston Celtics organization. They have great structure in place from the top to the bottom. And that is why I expect within the next 5 years, they're going to win a championship at some point with all of that talent that they do have. But they're better ran right now than the Lakers, if I do say so myself. LeBron James himself, I mean, he can be a Band-Aid for some of the damage that is being covered up with whatever is going on with that organization. I don't trust how Jeannie Buss may necessarily be running that organization. It hasn't been the same since Dr. Jerry Buss passed away in 2013. Let's just go ahead and get that out of the way. But now let's get into Kyrie's other comments, where he said that Kevin Durant is him looking at Kevin Durant is the first time in his career and in his life that he looks at another player when it comes down to clutch situations or having to hit a shot at the last minute. He said, quote unquote, that MF can hit that shot too. And then he comes out later in the day yesterday and goes on Instagram Live and wants to know why everybody wants to now spin this towards him taking a shot at LeBron James and has the audacity to say, why must it always be brother against brother? And he wanted to blame the media for this. No, Kyrie, you started this. No one was talking about this conversation yesterday. You put this energy out in the atmosphere yesterday. Everybody knows that you were taking a shot at LeBron James with what you said yesterday. Because, Scott, what is one of the narratives that has been said about LeBron James year after year after year, even though it's not necessarily true, is that LeBron James is not clutch. Now, I just want to remind Kyrie Irving and anyone who agrees with Kyrie Irving and what he said here of one thing. Let's go back to 2015, second round of the playoffs, Game 4, Cavaliers versus the Bulls. Very pivotal game. If the Cavs lose, they're down 3-1 in that series themselves. LeBron James hits a game-winning shot at the buzzer to tie the series up. One of the first players jumping up and down and hugging LeBron James after he hit that shot was Kyrie Irving. So I don't want to hear that LeBron James isn't clutch, that LeBron James isn't this and LeBron James isn't that. See, here's the problem, Scott. Kyrie Irving hit arguably the biggest shot in NBA history when he hit that three-pointer that gave the Cleveland Cavaliers the go-ahead lead against the Golden State Warriors in the 2016 NBA Finals. And he thought that that put him on the level of guys like LeBron James. Congratulations, you hit a shot. It was a phenomenal shot. But we all know the real reason that the Cleveland Cavaliers even had a chance to come back and win that series in the first place. That would be because of Mr. LeBron James. Now, Kyrie was stellar in that series as well, but we know that LeBron was the one who was making everything go. And we also know that prior to LeBron James deciding to come back to Cleveland, Kyrie Irving had no idea what the playoffs even smelled like. He knew very well what the NBA lottery smelled like because that's where the Cleveland Cavaliers were. And this was with Kyrie Irving as the main star and as the leader of that team. Now, the only thing that I will say in particular when people say Kyrie can't necessarily lead a team to a good record, I partially disagree with that for only one thing. His first year in Boston, the Boston Celtics were number one in the Eastern Conference, and he ended up getting hurt before the playoffs even started, and he couldn't play. Now, am I saying that if Kyrie plays, that maybe the Boston Celtics defeat the Cleveland Cavaliers in those Eastern Conference Finals and advance to the NBA Finals? No, I'm not saying that just simply because LeBron James was on a mission that year and he was going to find a way one way or another to get back to the finals. But I'm just saying that for the context of those who say that Kyrie doesn't necessarily lead teams to good records. Now, that doesn't necessarily exclude what happened the very next year when things just absolutely imploded in Boston and Kyrie did everything he could to deflect the blame on everyone else. But we see now who was really at fault for these things. And we also see how the Kenny Atkinson situation played out in Brooklyn. Kenny Atkinson, the coach of the Nets the year before Kyrie even showed up, him and Kevin Durant, who took a team that was horrible and led them back to the playoffs. There's nothing else really here that needs to be said when it comes to Kyrie Irving and his quirkiness. And
I'll just say one thing about Kyrie Irving, okay? He's a waste of my breath. Move on.
I absolutely agree with you on that because when it comes down to guys like this, he went to Duke for a semester or for a full year, and now all of a sudden he thinks that he's a philosopher and he's one of the greatest philosophers of our time. No, Kyrie. No, not at all. And when those guys end up being wrong about their things and you tell them that they're wrong with some of the things they're saying, their favorite line to tell people is, go do your research. Scott, I'm going to preface one thing that Colin Cowherd said today on his show on Fox Sports 1. Okay. And it's one of the greatest things that I have ever heard someone say on sports television. And it's honestly one of the true lines that people should go by in life. Colin Cowherd, before he opened up his segment today speaking on this issue with Kyrie Irving, he said, don't let others with no life ruin yours.
Okay. Big deal. Kyrie Irving is everything which is wrong with the NBA. So is Kevin Durant. These guys, that's all they have. All they can do is just focus on talking on a stupid podcast about coaching. I've always thought, to me, okay, a coach on the floor is considered a field general, the guy that's able to push the ball up the court and lead by example, let their play speak for itself, and be verbal on the floor to try to make their players better. But to be able to sit there and take it this way, I don't buy it. Everybody thought that when Frank Vogel took over the Lakers job this year, that he was keeping the seat warm for Jason Kidd. Guess what? Frank Vogel's a good coach. He is. Jason Kidd, being an assistant. But LeBron James has a chance to go out there and win a championship for 3 different organizations. And you know what? I won't tell you he's will I put him in the conversation best player ever? No. Maybe best top 10 or 15? Maybe. There's a lot, depending on what era that you go back to. But LeBron James has an opportunity to win a championship at 3 different stops. That, to me, and he was able to win one in Cleveland of all places, and I didn't like the way he went down to Miami with that little television skit of his. But with all due respect, he's faced a lot of good players. Otherwise, who knows how many more rings he would have. He's always been the best player on the team, and his supporting cast has always been questioned. But, to me, James is a heck of a player. And for these idiots to go out there and make boneheaded comments, I don't buy it. When Kyrie, it'd be like everybody saying when Michael Jordan left, well, Scottie Pippen, this is your opportunity to go ahead and lead. Guess what? You proved why you were the second man on the totem pole, because when the opportunity came for you to step up and show what you're really, really worth, you couldn't get it done. You needed the lead guy, and you were the co-star, because a real co-star.
Not only that, Scott, not only could he not get it done, but he also quit on the team. Because Remember that game 3 or that game 4 against the New York Knicks in 1994, where he was upset that Phil Jackson drew up the play for Tony Kukoc instead of drawing it up for him. And he just stayed on the bench and he didn't go back into the game.
But that's his personality, Xavier. Come on, really? It's his personality. He's not a leader. He's a follower. There's 2 types of people, either a leader or a follower. And Scottie Pippen's always been a follower. He's not a leader. And, you have guys like Isaiah Thomas is a leader. You have guys like Michael Jordan, who's a leader. Magic Johnson's a leader. LeBron James a leader. I mean, the list goes on and on. And, that doesn't mean that you can't have 2 superstars that are really leaders per se. There are a lot of them that are like that. But the 2 people in question right now that I look at, to me, has always been followers, Kyrie Irving and Scottie Pippen. They've always been the second.
And it's funny that you bring up this conversation about leaders, because now I'm really questioning who's the leader of the Brooklyn Nets, because Kevin Durant isn't a leader. Kyrie Irving isn't a leader. Scott, we know all too well that just because you're the best or the 2 best players on the team, that doesn't mean you're the leader. We watched this in Toronto last season. Kawhi Leonard was the best player on that team, but very evidently, Kyle Lowry was the leader. Kyle Lowry was the leader of that team.
Yeah, but we differ on that one, too, because Kawhi Leonard led by example, and he had the championship pedigree for what he did, where they were able to manage his time and minutes well. And you know what? When it came down to crunch time, he led by example. So there's 2 different types of leaders, those that are verbal, those that lead by example. And I don't mind saying this, too, okay, and I will say it on our broadcast. My wife, Candy, is a great leader with her employer. And a lot of her bosses respect the living daylights out of her, because she's not one of those verbal shouting type of people. She goes out there and knows how to manage personalities, and a lot of different personalities, I might add. And she believes in positive reinforcement. And you know what? She leads by example and lets her experience do talking. And, so there's different ways of going about doing it. And I'm proud of what she does, too. Now, why am I bringing her up? Because we're talking about leaders in this particular situation. And I think knowing I'm around 365 days a year, 6, depending on the leap year, is prototypical of what you deal with in life. But, I don't think Durant, could he have won a championship by himself? He could have. He should have stayed in Oklahoma City, and he should have stayed with either Harden or Westbrook. But no, he decided to jump ship, Golden State. got his rings. At least nobody will ever accuse him not having a ring when he leaves. More power to him. You have the ability to move around in free agency, which the system allows you to do exactly like that. I think Giannis Antetokounmpo is a leader. I really do. But the only thing he needs to do is just improve his game in certain areas a little bit, and they do need more supporting players around him, but he has to perform in the clutch. But Giannis is a leader in his own right, but I don't want to get off too much topic, but what you have in the NBA is you do have a country club. You have David Stern versus Adam Silver, okay, old school versus, the guy that's willing to kiss a player's rear ends and just, a guy that old school versus new school, if that's what you want to call it. To me, today's NBA is unwatchable. I don't care. You know what? I would love to be able to get Miami Heat content if I could. I did reach out to him once, never heard back from him, but I really never have pursued it much. But when I talked to Chris Roberts yesterday out in L.A., Chris and I are good friends. You've had an opportunity to go ahead and talk to him. He says, can't even watch NBA or Lakers anymore because the league is not what it used to be. And when you talk about Steve Nash, yeah, he was definitely a surprise hire. There's no question about that. He had no coaching experience, but that doesn't mean that he's not worthy of it. Larry Bird didn't have any coaching experience. How did that turn out? Didn't turn out too bad, did it? Steve Nash is, from what I heard, a very down-to-earth guy. And then, of course, Steve Kerr didn't have any coaching experience on it. You don't have to have a prerequisite, but you do need to have a pretty good coaching staff, so you have that extra experience mind or two. So if you do need to go ahead and call on somebody good, then it doesn't make any difference. But out in Brooklyn, he had a surprise hire. I think Nash will do okay if he can make sure that Kevin Durant keeps his mouth shut and Kyrie Irving. That's a tough situation. Now, I hear Jacques Vaughn is going to remain the assistant. Is that correct?
Yes, he's the lead assistant on the staff.
Right, so that may be a good move there. So, Nash has somebody to turn to. But when we talk about LeBron James, we talk about Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis is a heck of a player. He really is. So, again, he's made everybody better. He wanted out of New Orleans, but at least New Orleans got a decent haul for him back. That might end up being a very attractive job, depending on who ends up getting it.
I definitely agree with you there, and that's actually going to segue us into our next topic. And I'll start with the New Orleans Pelicans organization. When I think about that coaching search right now that they're going through, I really feel that they need to bring in a coach who is already experienced and knows how to build rosters, knows how to take young players and turn them into real NBA players and build teams into playoff teams. That's why I said that Doc Rivers would have been perfect for that job. Now, as of right now, maybe if you want to say Tyronn Lue is a candidate for that job, I'm okay with that. But the person who I ultimately want to see get that job, Scott, is Nate McMillan. I feel like that would be an excellent fit for Nate McMillan. I can't say it's going to be an excellent fit for Mike D'Antoni, just simply because everywhere Mike D'Antoni's gone, to me, he's inherited a situation with teams that were already somewhat semi-playoff teams anyway. When he went to Phoenix, yes, he inherited a bad roster, but when you get Steve Nash in free agency and you have Amari Stoudemire, who's finally healthy, to also go along with a really good player in Sean Marion and another one in Joe Johnson, who was still there at the time, it's not exactly going to be a rebuilding type of situation right there. And then when he went to the Knicks, that was one I just didn't understand just from his standpoint, just because it's an awful organization at this point, with James Dolan being the owner of the team. When he went to the Lakers, they had good players in place, but that was a chaotic situation from the start anyway. I mean, when Mike Brown being the coach, the late, great Kobe Bryant, rest his soul, he didn't want Mike Brown there as the coach. You didn't know who the number one guy on the team was going to be. Dwight Howard really wasn't healthy enough to play at the time that he was out there playing. Steve Nash fractured his leg in game 2 of that season. I mean, it was a chaotic situation all the way around. And then we go to Houston, where James Harden and that team, they were already one of the top teams in the Western Conference anyway. They just needed a coach that could get them into the direction of going where they ultimately went. And he did. But he hasn't been able to win a championship. But when it comes down to Mike D'Antoni and actual rebuilding situations, I don't know if New Orleans is a fit. I don't know if the Pacers is a fit for him either. And the reason I say that is because I don't know what that team's going to look like next season. There are rumors that Victor Oladipo wants out and Miles Turner wants out. Now, it should be noted that Victor Oladipo has come out and he's refuted these comments. But I also heard Paul George come out and refute these comments at one point, too. Right. But later on, he went back to his stance of, I want out of here, I want out of here, I want out of here.
Well, and, you know who I think really should go after. I think David Griffin is the general manager, right? I know they're talking about Tyronn Lue, but here's a name why he never got another job. Goes beyond my wildest imagination. What about David Blatt?
I agree with you there.
David Blatt, to me, why anybody hasn't even called this guy? To me, he got a raw deal out in Cleveland. Now, albeit Tyronn Lue finished the job and got them to win, so that doesn't look as bad on the surface because you win a championship. Which to me parallels when the Pistons let Rick Carlisle go, which I hated to see. I thought that was a mistake. The only way they could have gotten away with that decision is the fact that Larry Brown ended up coaching the team for 2 years and took them to 2 finals and won a title with that roster that Carlisle was starting to develop. But why David Blatt hasn't gotten a job in the NBA, to me, is beyond my wildest of imagination.
No, I agree with you there, but I'm also going to throw another name your way that I believe should honestly be in the mix for that job too, and that is Jason Kidd. Because I want people to think about one thing that Jason Kidd did. He went to Brooklyn, he was a head coach, but he had a whole cast of stars there, and Darren Williams had completely fallen off the map at that point. He leaves Brooklyn, goes to Milwaukee, inherits a team that had won 15 games the year before he arrived there. His first year there, they won 41 games, went to the playoffs, and gave the Chicago Bulls a run in the first round of the playoffs. Right. He has proven that he knows how to take rebuilding situations and at least turn them into something that is formidable, decent, and respectable. Is he going to turn them into a championship team? I don't know. I can't say that. I haven't seen him do that yet. But can he at least – and you talk about what that would do for Lonzo Ball. My goodness. Yeah. That would probably finally get Lonzo Ball on the right track. If Lonzo Ball can't get on the right track if Jason Kidd becomes the head coach, I don't know what to say anymore at that point about him. Yeah, I mean, that would finally get him going on the right track.
Yeah, I think Jason Kidd would be a good hire, but one thing you have to understand, though, just because you played the position well doesn't mean you're going to coach it well. And I'll take this one back to Ann Arbor, Michigan. Jim Harbaugh, excellent quarterback, right? But for some reason, the Wolverines haven't been able to develop that position like one would have thought under Jim Harbaugh's tutelage. Whether it's the personnel that he's brought in, I don't know. I'm not going to even go there. I'm not around the situation often. But you would think just because you played the position, there should be a lock that you can develop it. But I can't say that's always the case. But I think Jason Kidd would be a good hire. I think he did an admirable job in Milwaukee. He didn't do bad with the New Jersey Nets at the time, now Brooklyn Nets. So, but yeah, again, you've got a lot of potential good candidates out there. The question is where all the dominoes drop. And there's a lot more names out there than most people would realize, depending on who's interested in what at any given time.
Yes, but the 3 names I like the most are definitely Nate McMillan, Jason Kidd, and David Blatt. I definitely would love to see David Blatt being given another shot to be.
Well, but you know Tyronn Lue's going to get a job. You know that. And in fact, I hear he's probably one of the favorites to get the Clippers job, actually.
Yeah, and let's actually speak on that really quickly because as we do now know, the Clippers need a head coach. And Tyronn Lue is considered one of the candidates to be the favorite to land that job. But I'm not so sure that's going to happen, Scott, just simply because I don't know if the Clippers want to make an internal hire at that position.
I agree.
I don't know if they want to go with Ty Lue. I don't know if they want to go with Sam Cassell. And I believe Mike Woodson was on that staff too, but he's now going to New York to be a part of the staff that Tom Thibodeau is building there.
Oh, is he really? I did not know that.
Yes.
So he's going to be working on the Mike Woodson has connections to the New York Knicks too, I believe, right?
Yes, he does. He was the last coach that coached that team to the playoffs.
Well, there you go. Thank you for making my point. All right, I appreciate it. But, yeah, so then who do you think would be a logical fit for the worst franchise in pro sports?
There are 2 names in particular that I am hearing outside of the members who are already within the organization who would be considered for the job that honestly do make a lot of sense. Now, one of them I don't believe has a chance of happening just for a lot of different reasons there. But the top name that's actually been coming to everyone's mind right now from what the reports are indicating is Jeff Van Gundy could leave the broadcasting booth and accept this job.
No, I heard that.
That would be an excellent fit for the Clippers too because he would come in and he would establish culture immediately, and they would get back to that defensive first identity. But more importantly than anything, we wouldn't have people in here focusing more on going to strip clubs and eating their favorite chicken wings and trademarking nicknames like Lemon Pepper Lou. The focus would be on basketball at any and all times. Now, I'm not accusing Doc Rivers of anything there when I say that, but also I'll go back to what I said earlier. I'm not so sure how much longer Doc Rivers wanted to stick around in LA with the Clippers organization. I don't know that for a fact. But the other name that's been floating out there, and it's somewhat of a surprise, and then again, it's not, just considering the situation that the team is in with the stars that they have on the team, and they are a championship-ready team on paper. Phil Jackson's name has been floating out there, potentially as a candidate for this job. Now, I don't believe that's going to happen. Phil is much older, and he doesn't have a great relationship with Jerry West at all. And you know that Steve Ballmer is going to depend a lot on the genius and the experience of Jerry West in this coaching hire. As a matter of fact, it might be Jerry West that makes the hire himself, and we just won't officially know that.
Well, you know it. Well, come on. Seriously? You know that West is going to make the hire. And no, Phil Jackson isn't leaving his Montana digs to coach in the NBA. And nobody cares about that stupid triangle during this insane time of the NBA. Nobody, frankly, cares. If he really wanted to coach a triangle in New York, he should have coached it there and trying to find people to do it for him. But he didn't want his wins and losses record to suffer with an offense that once upon a time worked with much better personnel than what he ended up having in New York. So, all right, don't give me this garbage about Phil Jackson coaching the Clippers, okay? I'm not buying that. Now, the Jeff Van Gundy one, now that one's intriguing, and I heard that as well. So, that might make a little sense.
The two guys who I believe should be the leading candidates for that position outside of Tyronn Lue, just because I know they probably have the way they feel about that entire staff right now because of how things ended this season. But I like Jeff Van Gundy and I like Mark Jackson, and I'm not sure if I like any other candidates outside of that. However, this is Jerry West we're talking about here.
Right.
And I believe that Mark Jackson and Jeff Van Gundy will be in that ABC studio next year calling basketball games, because I believe the Clippers are going to make an unexpected hire that we don't know anything about.
So then who's going to be coaching in Houston? I don't care about that assistant coach from Minnesota that went down there.
No, absolutely not. I don't even understand why his name is floating around. Maybe it's because he has ties to Daryl Morey, who honestly, he should be on the hot seat too, as far as I'm concerned. But Tyronn Lue's name is floating around as a favorite to land that job too, and I actually like him in that situation just simply because he's inherited teams that have been close to at least getting to the championship,
right.
And he would probably unlock something different, and just also for the fact that he is a championship-winning head coach.
Yeah, but they still want to go with that small ball approach, and they got run out of the gym when they were doing that. I didn't think that small ball approach to me was equipped to win a championship any more than many years ago before you were born, that the run and shoot was the offense that the NFL was going to use that would have any sustainability.
No, I absolutely agree with you on that there, and that's another one of the reasons I say Daryl Morey should be on the hot seat, if not gone. The Houston Rockets are going to have to get some bigs. Here's one thing I like about how the Lakers season is going, Scott. They are so big. They have bigs all over that floor. Their point guards are big. The forwards are bigs. Their centers are actually centers. They have size. And with as far as they've been able to go at this point in the season, could potentially end up winning the NBA championship, which I do believe they will now that the Miami Heat have so many injury issues going on. It's going to encourage teams to go out and now want to go get more bigs with what they've seen the Lakers be able to do. I believe we are now finally going to go away from this analytics crap, and we're going to go back to the way basketball teams should be built and potentially the way that basketball should be played, just simply with the success that we've seen the Lakers have with all that size they have this year. So I would love to see Tyronn Lue in Houston, but you're going to have to get some bigs. And one name in particular that comes of interest to me, just because of the relationship and the experience that they have together in Cleveland, why not make a move to try to acquire a glue guy down low in the paint like Tristan Thompson?
I don't know. You tell me.
That's just one name in particular I believe should be floating out there for the Houston Rockets to go out there and acquire as one of their bigs, because they're going to have to get some bigs. That's the one thing we do.
Well, with all due respect, darn well the Golden State Warriors get a nice draft choice this year after what happened to them last year. So I don't know who's expendable, what they're going to do there. I mean, but I know Sam Cassell might be a popular local choice in Houston because of what he did there. Now, again, another guy with no coaching experience, but probably a very intellectual basketball IQ. I know Chauncey Billups' name has floated around in Indiana, another high IQ basketball guy that knows how to lead. Again, no coaching experience. You better have a good bench coach. So I know we could play this silly season about coaches where they're going to go, and it's all about system, the ones that should be there versus what they won't, whether Jeff Van Gundy. I don't know. Does he have the coaching bug? Has he talked about wanting to do it?
I believe his situation is very similar to that of John Gruden, if it's what he considers to be the right situation. I don't know if he considers the Clippers to be the right situation. I definitely didn't expect John Gruden to necessarily consider the Raiders to be the right situation for him because of where they were sitting at the time that he did accept the job. But it should be noted that he has experience with that organization previously,
right.
Head coach before. Jeff Van Gundy does not have any experience with the Clippers organization as being a previous head coach for them.
No,
he was the head coach of the New York Knicks. He was the head coach of the New York Knicks team that went on to play in the NBA Finals in 1999 as an 8th seed. And then later the head coach of the Houston Rockets teams that with Yao Ming and Tracy McGrady, they weren't able to get out of the first round, but they were at least a playoff team every year.
He has a good track record, good winning record. And I like Jeff Van Gundy, not Stan Van Gundy, who I can't stomach, okay? But Jeff Van Gundy, to me, is a good basketball mind. He really, really is. Now, whether he'd want to give up the cushy job to deal with today's players, I mean, that's another storyline itself. Dealing with today's players is another story. Again, you have a short window. Is there a fit between Kawhi Leonard and Jeff Van Gundy? Ooh, I don't know about that one. That, to me, is a little bit concerning. Kawhi Leonard has to be managed, and he's a very fragile personality. So I think you have to kind of soothe that situation over, as I understand what him and George can get out of their contracts in about a year. So that word is the franchise go long term to begin with. With their few rare moments of where they've been able to win, for the most part, but I think the one thing that they do have going for them is instead of having Donald Sterling as their owner, I still love Steve Ballmer, and the fact that you have the presence of Jerry West doesn't make the Clippers as laughable as they've been in the past, but still, you talk about the right players, the right coaching fit, and so forth. That's another story.
Right, they're at least going to be worth a look in free agency, because we remember the days where players would not even consider looking the Clippers' way in free agency whatsoever, no matter how much money they were offering, just simply because they were a poorly ran organization and they were just a laughable organization, to say the least. But when it comes down to that Clippers coaching job, Jeff Van Gundy, to me, he would be a great fit, but I don't believe he's going to be the person that's going to get hired. When I look at the Clippers job, Scott, I believe it's going to be very similar to what happened with the Toronto Raptors coaching job when Dwayne Casey was hired. Now, Nick Nurse was an internal hire. Am I saying it's going to be an internal hire? No, not necessarily. I'm saying this based from the standpoint of it's probably going to be somebody that we would not even expect to have even been in consideration for that job.
Probably, I think you're right, but I think that if the Clippers had any sense at all, that they would actually promote Tyronn Lue. I think he's familiar. He is his own man. He does have a championship that Doc Rivers does not have. In fact, Doc Rivers, we have talked about it before, has had 3-1 leads in the playoffs and haven't been able to close them out. I actually witnessed one of them when I was in Orlando covering the Pistons and the Magic, and Rick Carlisle out-coached Doc Rivers. And that's when Tracy McGrady was ready to go to the next round, but forgot he had kind of get past his round first. I mean, that'll be for another broadcast. So. But that said, well, I think we've covered a lot of things there in terms of Nash being the coach. And to me, Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, I could care less. They're everything what's wrong with the league. We'll go to our final thing of the night, and that's the NBA Finals. I know I think They start in about
They're less than 20 minutes away from
minutes
tipping.
away. So why don't we get ahead of it and talk about the NBA Finals? I know Bam Adebayo and Goran Dragic, I believe, are out for tonight. So Jimmy Butler, you better wear a lot of different shoes. I don't think you're going to be replacing Kareem Abdul-Jabbar like Magic Johnson did, but I'll be curious to see what the Miami does have to try to at least compete with the Lakers.
Well, there's going to be a lot of Kendrick Nunn tonight. That's one thing that we can say in particular. And he did come off the bench in game one in garbage time and put up some points on the board and at least start looking like the Kendrick Nunn that he looked like in the regular season before the pandemic suspended play. So that's going to be a big play there. Look for Kelly Olynyk and Myers Leonard to have to play big minutes tonight. Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, they're going to have to hit shots tonight. I believe this is going to be a more competitive game tonight, Scott, than most people actually think, because the Miami Heat are kind of going into this thing on house money. Nobody expects them to win this game with Bam Adebayo and Goran Dragic out. I mean, you probably have more people who are looking towards the way the Lakers will win this thing by 30 tonight. And I think the Lakers will do good to win this thing tonight by under 10 points. Honestly, I believe the heart and soul of the Miami Heat organization is going to be on full display tonight.
Well, that's a good comparison. I'll say what happened with the Milwaukee Bucks series earlier in the playoffs. That when Giannis went down, Chris Middleton and the rest of his teammates stepped up and they were able to get a win out of it. So what did that series end? I think it 5 games, I believe.
It ended in 5.
Right. So, you might be able to pull out a win, but I don't think you'll be able to pull out a whole lot more than that. I think the Heat are definitely overmatched by the Lakers. Anthony Davis is a beast. LeBron James is doing a pretty good job. And don't underestimate the job that Frank Vogel's done as a coach. And Rajon Rondo, to me, is on that team. He's won a championship before. He always finds a way to step it up in the postseason. So, how many games do you think that this series is going to go?
With Bam Adebayo and Goran Dragic being out, I now believe this is only going to be a 5-game series. I originally predicted the Lakers would win it in 6, but I have a hard time believing it's going to go beyond 5 now.
Yeah, I guess I'll go with you on that. I do. So, anything else you want to add?
No, just simply that I have enough respect for the Heat organization and Jimmy Butler as a player to say that they will at least pull out 1 game. But the Lakers will more than likely be hoisting their 17th Larry O'Brien trophy. And LeBron James will be winning his 4th NBA championship, and Anthony Davis will be winning his 1st. It's going to be a nice watch. It's just very refreshing right now to have all the sports that we have. And you'll be attending a sporting event tomorrow as well at Florida Atlantic University, covering a college football game for the first time in over a year, I believe. And I know that that's something you're very excited about and looking forward to. And those players and those coaches as well, they finally can get their season underway with most of their COVID-19 concerns now at least being under wraps for the time being.
Yeah, what I'm actually going to be doing, the last sporting event I covered was on March 11th, earlier in the year when Candy and I were in spring training covering the Dodgers and the Milwaukee Brewers. Ironically, they ended up meeting in the playoffs here, and of course, Dodgers ousted Milwaukee in 2 games. Not that you'd be surprised. Everybody knows that the Dodgers were overwhelming favorites to win the whole thing. But yeah, I have covered Florida Atlantic for a lot of years. I had a couple of years off, when one of my publications ended up leaving there, but then I started the Tribune again and got back involved a little bit. But I'm wearing a Florida Atlantic University hat. University of South Florida is my alma mater. I'm proud of the Bulls. I'm always going to be a Bull. It's who I am. But I also have a great deal of respect for the Florida Atlantic University program. I work with Howard Schnellenberger, who is the founder and creator of the program, and I've actually worked with it from time to time, even with other coaches, but it's nothing like Coach Howard Schnellenberger. But FAU does take on University of North Carolina, Charlotte, the 49ers. And I'll tell you what, it'll be a pretty interesting matchup. I'm really looking forward to going to the game because with all the different sports that you've had to do remote, it'll be nice to be in a press box again. Obviously, we'll have masks on and certainly take the necessary protocols we have to do to be safe. I'm okay with that. There'll be virtual interviews. I get that. But you know what? To me, it's hard to watch sports without not being able to go to them, and call me an old creature of habit, but that's who I am, and I'm looking forward to spending time over seeing FAU take on the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. For those of you who know that Willie Taggart is now the guy in charge for FAU. He actually used to coach at USF. He went on to Oregon and Florida State. Those stops didn't work out. Florida State and Oregon. And I also believe he coached at Western Kentucky, if I remember right. But Willie, I hope he does well. And actually, another interesting irony with this FAU team is Jim Levitt, the guy who started the USF program from scratch. I actually met Jim a few years back during a homecoming game and wrote a story on my alma mater for the Detroit Monitor. It was pretty neat. Now, Jim is the defensive coordinator for FAU. So to make a long story short, it will be nice to be able to cover a game again. I don't think I'm going to do a lot with the NFL. Probably I'm hoping to apply for the Lions and the Jaguars game. I don't know if that credential request will go through. There's a mandate that the NFL has put on all their teams that you're only allowed to have the press box probably like 1/3 full. I'll certainly try. But if it doesn't go through, it won't be the worst thing on the planet. You try. I'll just commit myself to college football this year, and I'm completely okay with that. And, I have my responsibilities with the Miami Marlins for as long as we have left of this run. And we have the Florida Panthers as well. And we're really delighted that we get content from a lot of the major players. So, but yeah, we're looking forward to getting out in the field again. It really is. All the virtual stuff's good. But to me, it'll just be great to be out there. And I'm really, I had a lot of great memories with the FAU program. I saw them win their first 2 bowl games, one over New Orleans, the New Orleans Bowl, when Rusty Smith beat them over Memphis. And then I had an opportunity to see them in the Motor City Bowl, believe it or not. For me, it was a home away from home game. They played in my hometown, and they ended up beating Central Michigan. So it was neat to be able to see FAU up at Ford Field. But this might be special. It's all right because it's a COVID-19 year, and I think I'm really looking forward to writing on that. And if you want to find my article on the last event, you can find that in the southfloridatribune.com. I'll get into all the context stuff. So I'm really looking forward to it. It'll be really neat. So,
definitely looking forward to hearing how this experience is going to go for you on tomorrow.
Yeah, it'll be great. I'll tell you what, I'm really excited. I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, Katrina McCormick out at FAU does a great job. John Frazier, Justin Johnson, a couple props to those guys. They're some of the finest people I've ever worked with. And FAU to me, obviously University of Miami overshadows FAU, but FAU's a really good mid-major program in Boca Raton. And, I'll tell you one thing, Xavier, I tell all our fans out there, it's the only stadium in the United States where you can actually see the ocean, which is just a matter of a couple of miles apart from the press box. We're so high up. So if you want tranquility at its best, if you're in an FAU press box all the way in Boca, tranquility and serenity are 2 words that you'll always be able to think about seeing when you're up there. It's a great place. So I have nothing but the fondest of memories. I actually once considered FAU as a possibility back in '84, but opted to go to Tampa to USF because I got a job at the Tampa Tribune, and that was a situation that was too good to pass up. And USF was a great place. So in between the job and then the school, it worked out. But God bless FAU, and I have a lot of strong, good, positive feelings for the Florida Atlantic University Owls. And I should also point out my youngest niece, Bria Morganroth, is studying marine biology, and she's there as a freshman as well. So now there is a little family connection. I'm still the only one in my family that has a college degree. So we'll see if Bria can go ahead and follow in my footsteps. Time will tell. We'll see what happens 4 years from now. But it'll be fun.
Well, we're definitely wishing her all the best.
Yeah.
And that pretty much will wrap up the real and the rare on my end here tonight from all the basketball content that we have discussed. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, we hope that you have enjoyed all of the content that we have brought your way tonight, taking your mind off of some of the things that we have going on in our world today, because, of course, there's still so much going on. with the COVID-19 pandemic, and some people going through a really hard time right
Well, no, we were able to include a little bit of baseball here too. Let's not forget the thing that I'm very proud of what the Miami Marlins have done. Everybody wrote this team off as bottom feeders, and there are a lot of teams that are staying home okay for a while. This team here was a laughing stock. Not only bottom feeders laughing, but they're tell you what, they're going into bubble. They're going to be they're one of I think 4 teams I think left, 8 teams.
now. It's 8 teams overall, and it's 4 teams for each conference. The National League is awaiting their last team right now, as the Cardinals and the Padres are on the way. The Padres, another feel-good story in the MLB this year with the young stars that they have on that team. But congratulations to the Marlins, and also congratulations to the Tampa Bay Rays, who I believe are going to give the New York Yankees some problems.
I no doubt about that. Yeah, the Rays to me, you know what? Sometimes you wonder if they actually have a crystal ball as to how they do it with a low budget team that simply develops and then brings in veteran players to fill in the roster, kind of like what the Miami Marlins are doing. That may be the blueprint. Develop within and bring in some pieces to complement the young guys, and you have a pretty potent way of doing things. So I know we've had a chance to talk about a little bit of baseball, and I love the fact that we could disagree that you didn't care about A.J. Hinch and Alex Cora, and I do. And I respectfully disagree, but it's okay to disagree because everybody has different opinions. That's what makes this world as special as it is. So,
well, here's the thing about the point that you just made about the teams building up and then bringing in veterans to fill the holes. That's usually how we've seen it work the best in baseball anyway. We've seen situations where teams will load up on superstars and they won't even be good enough to make it to the playoffs. So I'll take that first strategy any day over trying to load a team up full of stars that are going to be a nice box office attraction to probably fill up my stadium. But if we're not going to the playoffs and if we're not competing for World Series trophies, eventually that attendance is going to go down.
Yeah, but I'll tell you this, even though you spend a lot of money and you win and you get that instant gratification of World Series, then you mortgage the farm system, you may win that championship, but it costs you 5 years down the road. So I guess I'll take the championship, at least have a World Series in your pocket, and that's something that everybody can be proud of. But there's other schools of thought that you should be able to win it either way. I don't know. It depends on how good your front office is, your manager and philosophy, and the way the game is really changing. But
yeah, we're kind of watching all of that play out right now with the Kansas City Royals organization.
Well, I dealt with it with the Tigers, but every organization has their challenges. Hey, even before the Houston Astros got caught up in their cheating scandal, they had to go through a very tough rebuild. A lot of teams do, so can't look upon them for whatever they did. That's just philosophical about every. Remember one thing: when it comes to sport by sport, okay, the NFL's built much differently too. You can't spend a lot of money on a lot of guys with a 53-man roster plus other players to go along with it. The NBA, you can invest more money into players because the roster size is considerably smaller. The NHL is built on a hard cap, and of course, Major League Baseball, the haves and the have-nots are what they are, but now there's ways to get around that if you are managed properly and you spend your money wisely and you make good moves. So every sport has its ways of doing things, but either way, it's all about winning the best way we can. The one thing I can tell you right now that I am impressed with all these sports is the way they've managed to handle the bubble. The NBA, one thing I will say positive about the NBA is they've done a magnificent job with their bubble. NHL, they were incredible with their bubble. And baseball had to deal with a few growing pains, but meanwhile, we're in the playoffs. So, and then the NFL, as we talked about it last night on the fantasy broadcast of Ryan Schoolroot, they're going to have to get ahead of this thing too, because this one could be worse than any of them since you have more and more players. So, but that's all.
And it should be noted that 2 more Tennessee Titans players did test positive today.
Okay, so I hope for Tennessee Titans, right? Place that they're not what the Miami Marlins were for a while, or get ugly for a while. But they have the taxi squad. I think they'll get ahead of it. I really do. But meanwhile, that does conclude this edition of The Real and the Rare. My name is Scott Morgan, Roth Motor City, Manmouth. He's Xavier McKnight. Glad to have Xavier with us. We do this twice a month. Xavier, why don't you let everybody know how they can get a hold of you?
Yes, you can follow me on Twitter at XTMCKNIGHII. The 2 I's at the end are both capitalized. You can follow me on Instagram at XMCKNIGH22. And you can send me a friend request and a follow request to Facebook and LinkedIn just by typing in Xavier McKnight. And you will be able to catch tonight's edition of The Real and the Rare on my YouTube channel, Xavier McKnight, as well.
Very well. Okay, if you want to hear the audio version of The Real and Rare, I'll give you ways for which to do that. You can do so on Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Let me go over that again. Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. In terms of following us, you can follow us at Tribune South. That's @ Tribune South. Facebook and Instagram, South Florida Tribune Gets It Done. You'll also see it on my YouTube channel as well, South Florida Tribune. We encourage you to subscribe to either Xavier's or mine, either way, or both, okay? And then you'll be able to see this broadcast. I know, of course, we'll share it up on Facebook later on as well. Our website is www.southfloridatribune.com. We have content from everywhere. We have our media distribution partners that send us material. We have columnists. We have all the broadcasts. We have a section for Motor City Sports, as well as other news and weather out there as well. So check out the website. Our email address is southfloridatribune@gmail.com. And let me go ahead and point out the Detroit contents under Motor City Monitor. So for all you Metro Detroit fans or Michigan sports fans, Motor City Monitor, you can be able to find a lot. And the Lions send us some stuff, and I get a lot of other interesting things. LinkedIn, you can reach out to me, Scott Morganoff, on LinkedIn. I'll be more than happy to accept your connection request as well. So anything they want to email to us about suggestions, how we could do better, by all means, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'll be more than happy to get back to you. So Xavier McKnight, once again, a really nice broadcast. Enjoyed this. I know we got into a lot more NBA conversation. There's nothing wrong with that. Right now, that's what's going on in a lot of different ways between the coaching situation as well as the NBA Finals. And, of course, we had an opportunity to talk a little bit of baseball as well. So very well-rounded broadcast for sure, and we hope that everybody out there has enjoyed it. So, all right, Xavier, why don't you go ahead and let everybody give them the COVID thing that you're so very eloquently great at.
Well, last night around 1 a.m., we all had a bombshell dropped on us. President Trump and his wife, Melania, the First Lady, they tested positive for COVID-19. This came hours after learning that a top White House official had also tested positive for COVID-19. Now, I know that there are many people out there that have their different ways that they feel about the president. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of him. However, I will say that I wish him and his wife a speedy recovery. I want to say this to everyone right now who is joking and laughing and taking pleasure and enjoyment in the misery that these two are feeling right now. Be careful about the energy that you put out in the atmosphere. Be careful about the energy that you put out into the universe, because eventually, at some point, that energy will be circled back to you. So you don't know how this could affect you or someone you love as well. So be careful doing those types of things. That's the one thing I want to say to everyone. And now to get into the main COVID-19 standpoint, once again, ladies and gentlemen, COVID-19 has not gone away. And we do not know when COVID-19 is going to go away. So with that being said, we need to continue to be vigilant and be responsible and use our common sense. Wear your mask, wear your gloves, social distance, don't gather in large crowds. Stay at home for the most part if you can. Most of us are now all going back to work. But when you can stay at home, do your best to stay at home as well. Because there are still very many irresponsible people out there who still are not taking this very serious. And once again, a pat on the back to all of those who are doing this to take this serious, and you understand that this is a real thing that we are going through. And unless we do all of these things to be vigilant and responsible, we're not going to get through this thing. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, be vigilant, be responsible, and use your common sense.
Couldn't have said it any better. I mean, my philosophy is I don't mind going to work. And if you do, and another thing that we like to do is if we're going to go to a restaurant, we go there right when it opens up is what we do. So there are no crowds. And when we go out to the market, we try to get there as early as we can to avoid the crowd. So, don't take this thing for granted. I do want to send my get well wishes to the President of the United States. Perhaps this is a little bit of a wake-up call to even him to realize that COVID is something to take seriously, and he might, at least if anything else, get a better understanding of how indeed this virus is, because it is deadly and it is something that you don't wish upon even your worst enemies. So with that said, this does conclude this edition of The Real and the Rare. We hope you guys have a great weekend. Xavier and I will be doing this. We do this twice a month. And, of course, Xavier McKnight is also another broadcast as well. The one that he's participating on now is Fantasy Football with myself and Ryan Skorud. So we run that broadcast on Thursday nights as well. So on behalf of Xavier McKnight, my name is Scott Morganmouth of Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on tonight's edition of The Real and the Rare, and we will catch you the next time. Good night. God bless. Be safe, and see you later.